You walk into a casino at what you're fairly sure is early evening. You play a few hands, watch a few spins, lose track of one small thing here and there. When you finally step back outside, the sky is a completely different color than you remember it being. Not a little different. Completely different. Hours have vanished, and you have no real memory of where they went. That feeling isn't an accident, and it isn't just you having a wild night. It was engineered, tested, refined across dozens of casino floors, and written down in painstaking detail by a man who spent his entire career studying exactly how to make you lose track of time. But here's the twist: almost nobody knows. The man who literally wrote the book on it says the popular explanation for why is completely wrong. Think about this. You've walked into casinos in different cities, different countries, different decades of your life. Massive resorts on the Las Vegas Strip, smaller riverboat casinos, tucked-away card rooms. Different games, different crowds, different budgets walking through the door. But almost every classic casino floor shares two things you'll notice the moment you really look for them: no clocks anywhere on the walls, and almost no windows letting in a single beam of natural light. Why does nearly every casino on the planet strip away the two simplest tools humans use to track time? Not the restaurants attached to them, not the hotel lobbies leading in. Specifically the gaming floor itself. The one room in the entire building where the operator has the most control over what you notice and what you don't. You're probably thinking, easy, they want you confused about how long you've been gambling, so you keep playing and keep losing money. That's the popular explanation, repeated in articles and conversations for decades, and it sounds exactly like the kind of cynical trick a casino would pull. Except the person most qualified to confirm or deny it has publicly called that explanation a myth. Not an exaggeration, not a simplification, a myth, straight from the person who arguably did more to shape modern casino design than anyone else in the industry's history. To understand what's actually going on, we have to go back to a man named Bill Friedman, a former casino manager who ran two properties on the Las Vegas Strip, the Castaways and the Silver Slipper, through some of their most successful years, at a time when both properties had struggled financially under previous management. After leaving the industry side of the business, Friedman spent years systematically studying more than 80 different casinos across Nevada, trying to figure out exactly which physical design choices actually kept gamblers on the floor longer and which ones didn't. The result was a book released in 2000 called Designing Casinos to Dominate the Competition, running over 600 pages and distilled into 13 core design principles that much of the industry quietly adopted afterward. Friedman's philosophy centered on one core idea: everything in a casino's physical environment should point a gambler's attention toward the games themselves and nothing else. Low ceilings, to create a sense of intimacy rather than grandeur. Maze-like floor layouts that kept players curious about what sat just around the next corner, instead of giving them a single clear sightline to an exit. Slot machines and gaming tables placed immediately at every entrance, instead of an open, empty lobby that might remind a visitor they'd just arrived from somewhere else entirely. Every choice, according to Friedman's own writing, existed to keep a gambler's focus locked onto the felt in front of them rather than the walls, floor, or ceiling around them. Here's where the actual mystery gets more interesting than the simple version people usually repeat. Friedman himself has directly pushed back against the idea that clocks and windows were removed as some kind of deliberate manipulation dreamed up by casino operators to trick unsuspecting gamblers. In his own words, it wasn't the operators who demanded that change at all. It was the serious players themselves. Friedman has argued that dedicated gamblers actively wanted an environment that let them mentally escape the outside world entirely, one where the time of day, the weather, and the passage of hours simply stopped being relevant information, competing for their attention. Removing clocks and sunlight wasn't a trap set for an unsuspecting victim. It was closer to a feature request from the exact customers spending the most money on the floor. That distinction matters more than it might seem at first. A trap implies someone is being deceived against their will. A requested escape implies something closer to a shared agreement, where both the casino and its most dedicated players wanted the same disorienting environment for entirely different but overlapping reasons. The player for the escapism, the house for the extended playing time that escapism happened to produce as a side effect. Neither explanation cancels the other out completely. They're both quietly true at the same time. which is exactly the kind of nuance that gets lost every time this topic gets flattened into a simple villain story. There's real science sitting underneath all of this too. Human beings rely heavily on environmental cues, sunlight in particular, to regulate their internal sense of time passing, part of the same biological system that governs sleep cycles and jet lag. Strip away natural light entirely, keep the artificial lighting consistent day and night, and remove every visible clock, and the ordinary cues a person's brain uses to estimate how much time has passed simply stop arriving. Research on time perception has repeatedly shown that people placed in environments without natural light or visible clocks consistently underestimate how long they've spent doing an absorbing activity, sometimes by hours, without any deliberate deception required beyond the removal of the information itself. Slot machines add another layer on top of this, engineered with variable reward schedules similar to what keeps people scrolling social media apps, small unpredictable wins arriving just often enough to keep a player's attention locked onto the next spin instead of the room around them. But the story doesn't end with Friedman's principles becoming permanent industry law, and this is the part that complicates the popular myth even further. Starting in the mid-1980s, a designer named Roger Thomas, working alongside casino owner Steve Wynn, deliberately broke almost every one of Friedman's rules while designing properties like the Bellagio. Thomas filled his casino floors with skylights, natural sunlight, high ceilings draped in elaborate fabric, and clear sightlines instead of disorienting mazes, arguing that Friedman's darker, maze-like approach made many visitors feel anxious and trapped rather than comfortably absorbed. Thomas believed relaxed, confident gamblers wagered more money than anxious ones desperately searching for an exit. His brightly lit, open approach became enormously successful, proving that the windowless, clockless formula wasn't some universal law of casino profitability at all. It was one design philosophy among several, and a genuinely different one eventually outcompeted it in some of the industry's most profitable properties. So the honest answer sits somewhere between the popular myth and total innocence. Casinos really did strip away clocks and windows deliberately, and that choice really does appear to extend playing time by disrupting a gambler's internal sense of time passing. But the motive wasn't a secret trap built by scheming operators rubbing their hands together. It grew out of a genuine, mutually reinforcing relationship between what serious gamblers said they wanted and what kept them playing longer, refined by one meticulous researcher's study of 80 casinos, then partially reversed by a completely different design philosophy that succeeded just as well using the opposite approach. So, what if Bill Friedman had never written his book at all? Individual casinos might have kept experimenting independently with windowless, clockless designs without ever formalizing why it worked, passing rough instincts down from one floor manager to the next without any shared vocabulary for what they were actually doing or why. The industry might have taken decades longer to consciously understand the psychology behind what serious gamblers were already asking for. Roger Thomas's bright, open counter approach might never have had a well-documented rulebook to rebel against in the first place, since rebelling against an unwritten, scattered set of instincts is a much harder pitch to make to a nervous casino owner than rebelling against 600 pages of confident, published principles. Remember that missing afternoon you've lost inside a casino floor without ever quite noticing the hours slipping past? It was never simply a trick played on you against your will. It was a carefully studied, endlessly debated piece of design psychology, built partly from what dedicated gamblers themselves wanted, refined by one obsessive researcher's decades of observation, and eventually challenged by an entirely different philosophy that proved the windowless formula was never as absolute as the popular story makes it sound. So next time you walk out of a casino, and the sky outside looks nothing like you remember it, remember what's actually happening. You're not simply the victim of a clever trick. You're standing inside one of the most studied, most contested pieces of behavioral design in the entertainment industry, built from real research, real player preferences, and a genuine disagreement among experts about what actually works. You've lost that afternoon 100 times without noticing. Now you know why.